A broken federation, a laughing press, and a legend on live TV, saying the new coach could not direct traffic. At the centre of the wreckage, an old man in a tracksuit, chain smoking on a training pitch, watching the joke everyone was mocking. Back in 1978, César Luis Menotti had won Argentina its first World Cup. Now he looked at a fullback nobody remembered and told the president one thing: give him a contract. He is going to be worth it. This is César Luis Menotti was right about Scaloni, but nobody believed him. Before he was a prophet, César Luis Menotti was a thin, restless forward from Rosario who was never quite good enough to be a legend on the pitch. He played for Rosario Central, the club he loved most in the world. He played for Racing, for Boca Juniors, where he won a league title in 1965. He crossed the ocean to play for the New York Generals when American soccer was barely a rumour. And then he landed at Santos, where he spent a season standing next to Pelé and watching up close what football looked like when it was played by a god. He retired around 1970 with a modest career and an enormous idea. He had decided that football was not just a game to be won. It was a thing to be done beautifully or not at all. That idea would make him famous. It would also make him a lifetime of enemies. He learnt the trade fast. In 1973, he took an unfashionable club called Huracan and built a team so gorgeous to watch that people still talk about it half a century later. Players like René Haussmann and Miguel Brindisi played football that felt like jazz, and the whole country fell in love with them. They did not win everything. They won hearts, which in Menotti's private accounting counted for far more than any medal. And that philosophy earned a name: Menottismo, the belief that the goal is a pass into the net, that players can stop running but must never stop thinking, that a team owes the public joy before it owes anyone a result. It split the country in two. On one side, Menotti and his romantics. On the other, the pragmatists led by Carlos Bilardo, who believed winning was the only poetry that mattered and that a beautiful loss was still a loss. Menottistas versus Bilardistas. Argentina has been arguing about it ever since, at dinner tables and in bars, like a religious war with no possible ending. In October 1974, Argentina handed him the national team. And here is the part the mythology likes to blur. The World Cup he is remembered for did not come in 1974. It came 4 years later.
Huge thanks to our sponsor, OK Jersey. If you're looking to add high-quality kits to your collection, from the latest 2026 season to iconic retros, they've got you covered starting at just £15. Please use my promo code MAUS to get an 8% discount.
In 1978, on home soil, under a military dictatorship that wanted a shiny trophy to wave at the world while it made its own citizens disappear, Menotti knew exactly what he was standing on top of. He was a proud man of the left, a reader of Borges, coaching a national showpiece for generals he privately despised. Left-wing football, he once said, is generous and committed only to the public. And now here he was, delivering a spectacle for a regime that was the opposite of everything he believed. So he did the only thing a man in that trap could do. He tried to win it his way, ball on the floor, country's name on his back, and hoped history would eventually sort out the difference between the team and the tyrants who used it. He made the call that could have ended him before it began. He left a 17-year-old Diego Maradona out of the squad, deciding the boy was too young and too precious to be thrown into that fire. Half the country wanted his head for it. Then he sent out Mario Kempes and Daniel Passarella and the rest, beat the Netherlands in the final in extra time, and gave Argentina the first World Cup star it had ever worn on its chest. It was messy. It was glorious. That brutal 6-0 win over Peru in the second round, the exact result Argentina needed to reach the final, still smells faintly of something arranged, and the whole triumph sits forever under the shadow of the regime that cheered it. But it happened. And the following year, to silence anyone who called it luck, Menotti took a 19-year-old Maradona to the Youth World Cup in Japan and won that too, playing the kind of football that made grown men weep. His reign did not end in glory. In 1982, with Maradona finally in his senior squad, Argentina went to Spain to defend the crown, just as the country stumbled into a war over the Malvinas. They were knocked out in the second round, and Maradona was sent off in a fury against Brazil. After that, Menotti went to Europe, coached Barcelona, and even got to manage the same Maradona he had once left home as a boy. Through all of it, the image never changed. The shaggy mane of hair he cut himself, the cigarette burning between his fingers on the touchline, his friend in loneliness, as he once called it, the impassive stare, the slow drawl, the quotes that sounded more like a philosopher than a football manager. He was the coolest man in any room he ever walked into, and he knew it. Argentina did not just respect Menotti, it wanted to be him. And that same summer of 1978, a few weeks before Menotti lifted that first trophy, in a small town called Pujato, a baby was born who would one day finish the story the old man started. Nobody noticed. Why would they? He was just a kid named Lionel. Lionel Scaloni grew up to be exactly the kind of footballer nobody writes songs about. He was a fullback, a good one, honest, hard-working, tactically sharp, the sort of player coaches quietly love and highlight reels completely ignore. He came through Newell's old boys, the same city, the same football culture that produced Menotti. Then he went to Spain and spent the best years of his career at Deportivo La Coruna, during the strange, wonderful era when that little club briefly bullied the giants of European football and even won a Spanish league title. He earned a loan to West Ham in England. He drifted later through Racing, Lazio, Atalanta. A serviceable professional who saw a lot of dressing rooms, learnt the game from the inside out and lifted almost nothing worth remembering. By his own honest admission, he was never anything special. A right-back who defended well, crossed decently, and understood the game better than most gave him credit for. The kind of player who ends up coaching, because the ones who really study the sport are usually the ones who had to think their way through it, not float above it on pure talent. And for one strange month in 2006, his ordinary life brushed right up against greatness. Argentina took him to the World Cup in Germany, and he featured in that tournament. And in the second group game, a 6-0 demolition of Serbia and Montenegro, Scaloni sat on that bench and watched an 18-year-old come on for his tournament debut. The kid scored, naturally. His name was Lionel Messi, and even then, every single man in that squad already understood they were watching the sort of talent that shows up maybe once a century and never asks permission to arrive. Sit with the symmetry for a second. The man who would one day build an entire kingdom around Messi was, at the very beginning, just another teammate watching him walk on. He shared a pitch and a dressing room with the greatest player who ever lived, back when Messi was a shy teenager who barely spoke, and Scaloni was a squad fullback nobody outside Argentina could pick out of a lineup. He did not remember it as destiny. Nobody did. It was just a nice line for a future obituary that everyone assumed would be very short. Because when his legs finally gave out, Scaloni did the thing forgotten fullbacks do. He went quietly into coaching. An assistant here, a scouting job there, cones and clipboards, and long flights to watch other people's players in half-empty stadiums. He did not chase the spotlight, because the spotlight had never once looked for him. He learned instead the slow way, the humble way, soaking up how tournaments actually worked from the inside, while more famous men assumed they already knew. When Jorge Sampaoli took the Argentina job, Scaloni tagged along as one of his helpers, invisible, anonymous, the very last man anyone in the country expected to matter. He carried the analysis, watched the tape, said little, and stayed in the background while the whole project sailed straight into the iceberg that was Russia. When the ship went down, everyone assumed he would go down with it, just another name on the list of people who had failed Messi. He had a famous friend in an old prophet who came from his same city and a photograph in his past with a teenage god. That was the entire resume. And soon that resume would stop being a punchline and start being a lifeline, because Argentina was about to fall apart in front of the entire planet. To understand why they turned to a nobody, you have to understand how much had already been lost, and how publicly. The golden generation had spent years chasing a trophy and inventing brand new ways to lose it. The 2014 World Cup final, gone to Germany after Gonzalo Higuain missed a chance so open that strikers still wake up sweating about it. The 2015 Copa America final, lost to Chile on penalties. The 2016 Copa America final, against Chile again, lost on penalties again. 3 finals in 3 years, 3 defeats. And after that last one, Messi stepped up, missed his spot kick, sat down in the middle of the pitch and announced his retirement from the national team on the spot. The greatest player who ever lived, quitting his own country in tears because the pain had finally grown heavier than the love. He came back, of course. He always comes back. But the team he returned to was already rotting from the inside, held together with reputation and hope. Russia 2018 was where the golden generation finally died on camera. Argentina arrived with Messi and a squad that on paper should have terrified people, and instead played like a corpse in light blue. They drew with Iceland, a country with more volcanoes than professional footballers, and Messi missed a penalty. They were taken apart by Croatia 3-0, a result so humiliating that grown men in Buenos Aires turned off their televisions and stared at the wall. They scraped out of the group on a last-minute prayer against Nigeria, the whole nation watching through their fingers. And then a 19-year-old named Kylian Mbappe ran through their defence like it was a turnstile he forgot to pay for. 4 goals conceded in that game, 9 across the tournament, the worst of any team there. Knocked out, over, Messi on his knees again, watching another tournament burn to the ground. The federation was broke, embarrassed, and completely out of ideas. The famous managers they wanted either cost far too much or flatly refused to touch the job, because coaching Argentina had become the sporting equivalent of holding a live grenade with the pin already out. This was a country that had already chewed up genuine legends and spat out the bones. Maradona himself had tried it in 2010 and been humiliated by Germany. Alejandro Sabella had gotten closer than anyone and still lost the final. The job did not just break careers, it ate them whole and asked for seconds. So they looked down their own bench, at the anonymous assistant with the friendly face and the empty trophy cabinet, and gave the seat to Lionel Scaloni. Not because they believed in him, because he was cheap. He was already there, and nobody with a bigger name would answer the phone. The reaction was exactly what you would expect. The press treated it like a prank. Pundits laughed on air. And Diego Maradona, the actual living god of Argentine football, delivered the line that would chase Scaloni everywhere he went, sneering that the man could not even direct traffic, let alone a national team. The word everyone used was temporary, a caretaker, a warm body to keep the seat occupied until a real, famous, expensive name became available. 40 million obsessives had decided, before he coached a single competitive match, that Lionel Scaloni was an accident waiting to happen in slow motion. Almost everyone agreed. There was, however, one man in the building who did not. By then, Menotti was not a young man in a tracksuit anymore. He was an old lion with a bad cough, installed since 2019 as the Argentine Football Association's director of national teams, a living monument. The last man to have actually won a World Cup for the country, kept around partly for his wisdom and partly for his ghosts. And the old lion looked at the placeholder that everyone else was busy mocking, and saw something the rest of the country was too exhausted and too cynical to notice. He saw a coach humble enough to actually listen. He saw a man young enough, close enough in age to the players to sit among them in the dressing room instead of looming over it like a distant statue demanding worship. He saw someone who had quietly started doing the unglamorous work, flying thousands of miles to watch forgotten players in leagues nobody bothered to scout, building a squad from the foundation up instead of just pointing Messi at the goal and praying, the way every genius before him had done and failed. Menotti recognised it because it was his own method wearing a younger man's face. Watch everyone. Trust the ones who think. Build a group, not a collection of names. Scaloni was, whether he knew it or not, a Menottista, and the old prophet was not about to watch the Federation strangle that in the crib. The Argentine Football Association president Claudio Tapia said it plainly later, and the quote is the entire story compressed into a single sentence. Menotti was the one who told him that Scaloni had to be the coach of the national team, not just for a few friendlies. Give him a real contract, all the way to the end of the World Cup, whatever the result, whatever the result. Read that again and let the weight of it land. The old prophet was asking a broke, humiliated, panicking federation to bet its entire future on a fullback nobody remembered, and then to promise, in advance, in writing, not to fire him even if the whole thing went up in flames on the biggest stage on earth. It was, on paper, madness. And Menotti spent his own hard-earned prestige on it anyway, without blinking, because he had learned in 1978 that the people who mock you before a tournament tend to go very quiet after one. When the mockery came, and it came in relentless waves, the old man used his legend as a shield. He backed the staff in public. He absorbed the pressure that would have crushed a rookie coach inside a month. He praised the group as loyal, humble, genuinely bonded to the shirt, at the exact moment everyone else was busy drafting the coach's obituary. He became the invisible hand behind the whole project, the one voice in Argentine football with enough authority and enough scars to tell a furious nation to sit down, shut up and wait for the work to finish. Nobody wanted to hear it. That is the cruel job description of a prophet. You are simply a man who happens to be right too early to be believed, and who has to live with the loneliness of it until the rest of the world finally arrives. So Menotti made his BET, lit another cigarette, and waited for everyone else to catch up. It caught up faster than anyone dared dream. The placeholder went to work, and the work was surgical. Scaloni built a wall in front of that leaking defence, pairing snarling young centre-backs who treated every 50-50 challenge as a personal insult and every clearance as a matter of honour. He found a goalkeeper in Emiliano Martinez that most of Europe had written off, a man who had spent years loaned out and ignored, and who turned out to not just tolerate pressure but actively feed on it. He surrounded Messi with runners and soldiers who would do the ugly, thankless work so the genius could stop defending, stop chasing back, and save every last drop of his magic for the 3 seconds that actually decided a match. Then he made the calls that get coaches fired. He cut the old egos, the famous names with reputations and history, and brought in kids like Julian Alvarez and Enzo Fernandez who would run through a brick wall for the man standing next to them. He was not assembling a team of stars. He was building a family that happened to be very good at football. Then something strange started happening to every man who walked into that camp. Defenders who looked ordinary at their clubs turned into monsters the moment they pulled on the light blue. Midfielders who looked a step slow on a Saturday suddenly found an extra gear on a Tuesday for their country. Rodrigo de Paul became the engine, running until his legs filed a formal complaint, closing every gap so Messi never had to lift a finger in defence. The players said it themselves, half laughing, like they had found a cheat code. Put on the Argentina shirt, step out next to Messi, a solid club player became a great international one. A great one became untouchable. That was not luck. That was chemistry, built slowly and stubbornly by keeping the same warriors together for years, until they knew each other's movements in the dark. And it was the one thing on earth that money could never rush. Slowly, then all at once, the joke started winning. By the time a trophy was actually on the line, They had gone 19 matches without a single defeat. The first real proof came in the cruelest possible place. The 2021 Copa America final against Brazil in the Maracanã, in the spiritual heart of Argentina's oldest and most hated enemy. 28 years without a major trophy, their last one all the way back in 1993. Every ghost and every choke and every crying photo of Messi pressing down on their shoulders, and to break the curse they had to win in their rival's living room with the entire world fully expecting them to fold one more time. In the semi-final against Colombia, it went to penalties, the exact place where Argentine dreams always died. Instead, Emiliano Martinez saved 3 of them, talking trash the whole time, looking grown men dead in the eye and telling them they were already beaten. He was right, they were. In the final, Angel Di Maria chipped one delicate, perfect finish over the keeper. And then 11 warriors defended it with their teeth, their shins and their souls until the whistle blew. 1-0 in the Maracanã against Brazil. 28 years of pain, finally over. That was supposed to be the miracle. It turned out to be only the warm-up. In 2022, in Qatar, Scaloni's Argentina won the World Cup itself, the country's first since 1986, ending Messi's career-long ache in what is probably the most cinematic final the sport has ever produced. Drag it back to level with a hat-trick in the space of minutes. It went to extra time. Messi scored again. Mbappe equalised again from the spot. It went to penalties, the graveyard where so many Argentine nights had ended, and this time the shootout belonged to them. Emiliano Martinez, the keeper nobody had wanted, the man loaned out and forgotten for a decade, made the saves that mattered most. And when the last kick went in, Messi finally lifted the only trophy that had ever escaped him, the one thing his career had been missing. Then, because a real dynasty is never a fluke, they went out in 2024 and won the Copa America all over again. Copa, World Cup, Copa. The same core, year after year, the tightest and most feared team on the planet. The man who could not direct traffic had built the most ruthless machine in world football. The nobody had turned himself into the most successful manager in the entire history of the Argentine national team. And the only reason his face is not already painted on a mural somewhere in Buenos Aires is that the paint has not finished drying. And every doubter who had laughed in 2018 now had to swallow one very uncomfortable fact. One person had called it. One person had looked at the placeholder and seen an architect. The old man in the tracksuit had been right the entire time. Back when being right just got you politely ignored by a country too tired to hope. Menotti at least got to see it. He got to watch his impossible bet pay off in full twice over, before the story demanded its final brutal piece of symmetry. On the 5th of May, 2024, César Luis Menotti died. He was 85, worn down by illness. A lifetime of cigarettes finally collecting their long overdue bill. He passed while Argentine football was doing the one thing he loved most in the world, playing a match. A domestic final was underway when the news broke. Estudiantes against Vélez, exactly the kind of game he had spent his whole life watching. The announcement went out over the stadium, and the whole ground fell silent and held a minute for the man who had taught a nation how it wanted to be seen. El Flaco, the thin one, the prophet, gone on a football afternoon as if he had timed it himself. Scaloni, the coach he had staked everything on, posted a photograph of Menotti holding the World Cup and called him a master of football, thanking him for the endearing talks that had left their mark on him forever. Messi, the shy boy Scaloni once watched from a bench in Germany, called him one of the great references of the game. The generals Menotti had once despised were long dead and disgraced, their names dragged through history. The football he believed in had outlived every single one of them, and was now the most successful football on the planet. Now walk the whole thing backward and feel how perfectly it closes. A thin forward stands next to Pelé and decides that football, above all, must be beautiful. He wins a World Cup in 1978 under a regime he hates and refuses to let the tyrants own the joy. That same summer, in a small town, a baby is born. The baby grows into a fullback nobody remembers, shares a pitch with the greatest player alive, fades quietly into a clipboard, and is handed a poisoned job that the entire country expects to destroy him. And the one man on earth who believes in him is the same old prophet whose trophy he was born beneath, from the same city, carrying the same idea about how the game should be played. The prophet spends his final years shielding the nobody from a nation that wants him gone. The nobody repays that debt by turning a graveyard into a dynasty. And the prophet lives just long enough to watch all of it happen, twice, then dies during a football match, right on cue, as if the universe had been quietly scripting the ending the whole time and simply waited for its cue. Menotti spent his entire life insisting that the goal was a pass into the net. His last and greatest assist was a fullback nobody wanted. He slid it perfectly into the path of history and let Lionel Scaloni finish it. He was right. It only took the rest of the world 6 years and 3 trophies to finally admit it.